Hi everyone, good morning. So we'll talk about a bit of SIG release and what are the tools and operations involved and what are the challenges that a SIG release faces in general in most of the releases. So I'll give a very high level overview of how the entire cycle looks like and what are the teams involved and what are their roles and the tools that help in the process. So yeah, um, all of the people behind it, of course. Um, let's get started. A very brief introduction about me. My name is Subhasmita. I work at SIVO as a research and development engineer, and I've been part of the SIG release team for the CI signal bug triage, now release signal, and formerly I've been an LFX mentee and outreach intern. So moving ahead. Um, Briefly, these are the few honorable mentions of all of the cute SIG release themes over the time, and these represent like each. There are like multiple releases each year, 3 to 4 releases of Kubernetes happening each year, and each release has a theme, and it's community driven. So few mentions here, and throughout this talk, you can expect to see an overview of what the release looks like, what is the life cycle, the challenges behind it, and why is it important to have an efficient and sustainable release process, and how it can help both the contributors, volunteers, and the maintainers, of course. And yeah, the honorable mention for the automation tools that make our lives easier throughout the release management. Okay, at a high level, Kubernetes release is simply like assembling a multi-layer cake. Each layer is built by different people at different times, often in different kitchens, as you can assume. And the release process like takes all of these layers, like features, bug fixes, security patches, and stacks them up into a coherent, stable version. Just trust me, it's not just like a ship it button and pushing it. There are a lot of things happening behind it, and behind the scenes, a lot of people, folks working behind the scenes. And moving ahead to introducing the two major parts, two sub projects of both SIG release. Everyone, I think, release team is very familiar. Most of them being the mainstream knows about release team, but the unsung heroes are the release engineers. Those need to be mentioned each release because they are the people behind all of the efforts, all of the technical difficulties that might happen in each release, and they're fixing them, doing all of the hard work. And of course, release team is also doing the hard work, but on the frontier, and release engineering is in the back. So briefly, Kubernetes release team is like a rotating group of community volunteers who like plan, execute, and communicate the entire release. They are the wranglers, like they make sure each timeline is met and no one runs out of into like the sunset with a half-baked feature. And it's like full featured, it works, it doesn't break. On the other hand, like release engineering is all about the magic behind the scenes, like the tools, the automation, the continuous integration, and like the delivery pipelines that keep the release on track and on time. You can think of release team as the conductors in release engineering, and release engineering as the orchestra that never sleeps and it conducts uh, the team. I hope it's visible. I'm not sure if it's quite clear, but few aspects like the release team has sub teams, and the leaders are the emeritus advisor who's responsible for advising the entire release team on various matters. And the release lead is responsible for managing all of the sub teams inside a release team. So we have enhancements team, which is responsible for tracking all of the enhancements, the features, and making sure that all of the PRs and features that are there, like to be tracked, are in time and needs to be merged in time so that they are tested, well tested, and pushed to stability before cutting a release. And then there's docs. They make sure all of the new features are documented, well documented, and they have fallback documentation for users to like reference to in future. Then there's release notes. I'll come back to the release notes later on. So there's CI signals. All of the tests that Sriram talked about a few moments back are like monitored by the CI signal team. So if anything breaks, they are notified and they take care of like the initial procedure is to identify is this test fixable, or is this test like done fixable by the volunteers, or it needs to be escalated to the concerned people behind the entire test team, like the infra team or any test which involves that particular SIG. So they communicate with that and make sure that all of the tests are running and all of the tests are green. And each of the sub team needs to like provide a go, no go signal before each release cut, so that it's a clear path forward and we don't push bugs towards each of the releases that's coming forward. Then there's communication team. They're the frontiers. They are the ones who represent the internals of the release team towards the outside world, like the media, the CNCF community, and the rest of the end users. And release notes, they are a very important part of the release team. So they make sure that each of the features, each of the bug fixes, and everything that goes into are all well documented and all well presented to the end user. So there's transparency, and so the users know that with each of the updates, or each of the new releases, the bugs are fixed, the CVEs that are avoided, and all of the things that needs to be considered, and all the hard work that goes behind, and it gets surfaced to the end user as well. So yeah, this is a brief. CI signal has been like transformed to release signal now with the merging of the bug triage and CI signal. So it's one team now. I should have like changed it to bug triage. Oh, release signal. My bad. Moving ahead, as a brief, the overview of release lifecycle, it happens like it starts with the planning, the release lead, the advisors, and all of the sub-team leads. They come together, they start the planning, and how, like, set up a timeline, how this will work on with the coming month or coming 2 or 3 months, how this is going to happen, what features needs to be shipped, which date is for like cutting the first release. Like there are a couple of alpha releases, couple of beta releases cut before pushing out on a release candidate and finally the complete release. Then, the planning phase. Then development phase is where all of the shadows, all of the team come together to put together all of the hard work done by the community members and volunteers. So all of their features, all of the PRs are tracked and merged on time. Then Kubernetes has multiple release tools like Prow, and which helps in automating the testing system, which ensures the code and quality is top-notch, and any issues that might be identified earlier are identified. There comes the branch managers and release managers, who are responsible for like keeping a separate branch for each of the releases and making sure that all of the things are tracked and each releases are cut in a proper and efficient and in a correct way. Okay. I was skeptical about putting this, but it's just a fancy workflow of how this release cycle looks like. It's a continuous workflow. It keeps happening. It keeps repeating each of the release cycle. So there are issues that we identify, the features that are identified, and then an entire timeline is set up. The development goes into it. The tests are done. If the tests fail, they go back into the feedback loop again, and then they come out as, if they pass, they come out as the graduated features, and then they move on to the final releases. Apologies if this is not quite visible. I did not know how to make it a horizontal flow chart. So, okay. So this might look very simple, but each release comes with tons of challenges. which of course we take feedback on, and it gets iterated and improved on each release, one after other. So majority of the challenges that is in general faced in every release is the scale and complexity. From the technical perspective, like there are thousands of PRs and lots of features happening across different aspects of Kubernetes. So it's one of the largest open source projects maintained currently, all by volunteers. So it becomes very difficult to keep track of all of the PRs that are important and needs to be merged. Then there's the human force that's working behind, spread across different time zones and specialities, and managing the workload so no one burns out. It's completely necessary because this is a volunteer work. And ensuring that all of the critical fixes like the CVEs or any issues or any new features are tracked, and all land and time are all part of the tightrope work that's happening. The complexity like also extends to continuous improvement, and we're always on the hunt to refining the process. It is necessary to have like an efficient and sustainable release process because this is a tedious process and it keeps happening every 2 or 3 times a year. An efficient release process is very critical, not only for just producing high quality code or software, but also for like maintaining trust in the ecosystem. A stable process like encourages companies to adopt to new versions sooner so they can avoid any issues further in their software supply chain. So there are no software supply chain attacks happening, or there's no critical breakage in their entire workflow. Sustainability is the key, and if the process is too cumbersome then or stressful, that contributors may burn out and reducing like the project's vibrancy over the time. Efficiency and sustainability goes hand in hand, so all maintain each other. Okay. This release process is also like facilitated with the automation, and these automation tools, there are various automation tools, like I haven't mentioned most of them, but the major ones. So these form the backbone of the release process, and these are maintained and developed by the volunteers itself. And it's very specific and high level to, not high level, like it's tailor-made to each of the issues, each of the problems, and each of the features in the Kubernetes ecosystem, which is maintained by the release engineering team, and of course other volunteers. So we can think of Prow as our automated butler. So who is responsible for managing the PRs after they test the pass, after they pass the tests. So, and SIG release tools like ensure that branching for each of the release and tagging and the final artifact creation with all of the binaries happen smoothly. Then GitHub Actions and other integrations, like they add the guardrails for it, like linting and code style checks. Release notes automation turns like an otherwise tedious task into a breeze, ensuring like very smooth transparency for the end users. I think with the coming time, all of these automations are going to extend, and a lot more new tools are going to get added to make it easier for the volunteers to do the manual work for themselves, like the intelligent work and all the tedious work to be done by the tools. There's one tool called Krell. So each release is branched, and it's managed by the branch manager and release manager. This command line tool like simplifies the entire process, and it automates most of the process of cutting a release and processing all of the binaries for it. And then it reduces the manual steps to prevent like errors. Humans are prone to errors, so this is a way to avoid that. And since there are a couple of release cuts happening, like alpha cuts, where the new features are introduced to the end users, and they can test it out and get feedback from the community, and based on the feedback, the features are modified or improved on and then moved on to the beta releases. So there are a couple of beta releases cut, which ensures more on code stability, and so that all of the tests behind it happen or pass smoothly, so that they can be pushed on towards the release candidate and finally releasing the Kubernetes version. And after the release, it's not just cutting the release and then forgetting about the release. The maintaining of the release for the end users also happen quite few months after the release. So it's a continuous process, and it's a never-ending loop that we are in. So then there comes KCI Robot, which also like helps in automating a lot of release management tasks, all of the labeling all of the issues, and notifying the users who are working on the pull requests about, or the reviewers that who are managing the PRs or who are responsible for reviewing it. So it makes it easier for people to keep track of the work, because there's a lot of work and a lot of people putting their work into every day. So yeah, and it also like notifies about the CI pipeline, about the builder test failures. They get notifications on their Slack or on the emails about that the test grid, these tests are failing and these needs to be looked upon to, or these dates has been flaky for a couple of times, so these needs to work on. This is escalated by KCI Robot. In continuous integration and testing, so this is, since I said it's a continuous loop and it keeps happening each of the time, every day, all of the time. So this is also like, Prow also helps in that. We do have the core CI/CD system that's responsible for streamlining all of the tests behind it, all E2E tests, unit tests, and then other conformance tests. It makes sure that these tests are streamlined and it is in order as it needs to be, so that it facilitates the release process further. Moving ahead, we have the K8's container image promoter. It makes sure that only the specific images that needs to be promoted, that goes into the process, only those are promoted with proper validation and the images signed. So we can avoid any pushing any errors or any like vulnerabilities into that image. So it makes sure it is not there. It manages the risk associated with releasing untested or potentially vulnerable code. So it's like acting kind of a guard to all of the final images that's being pushed to the registry and further for testing. Documentation. I think Kubernetes has one of the vast documentation in the entire open source community. So lots of features, lots of bug fixes. All of these are mentioned in the release notes, as I mentioned before. And this is automated by the release notes, the Krell CLI tool that helps in like pulling out all of the PRs, headlines, and all of the features that are there, and creating a list of it and mentioning the overview of what goes into that release, what is coming out, all the features to look up to. And yeah, it helps the release team to reduce a lot of tedious work that goes into like pulling all of the PRs manually and checking if this is there or not, if this is included or not. So it's just simply start with the first PR that goes into the process and the last PR, like before the code freeze, that goes into the process, and then we put the SHA, the commit SHA, and it creates an automated release node in a fashion that we require and makes the process easier. Okay, it was very quick. So the future brings like increased intelligence in automation. AI might help identify a few problematic tests before they cause any issues. So as we are going ahead with the AI evolution, we are trying to adopt that to the release processes as well. Security will get more tighter, and with signed releases and SBOMs, to ensure like software supply chain integrity. We'll also like likely see more streamlined paths for contributors, making it easier for newcomers to like hop in more easily and get involved. So ultimately, a faster, safer, and more sustainable release, it lies ahead. Um, in the end, so Kubernetes release is a monumental effort that like blends the community coordination, rigorous processes, and automation tool, like thoughtful governance, and of course, it's challenging, but it's an ongoing improvement, um, which Kubernetes has made, which has made Kubernetes a trusted open source software that is being used in a lot of different businesses across the cloud native world. So, yeah. And shout out to all of the contributors and maintainers who are like working day and night in every different time zones to like keep up the Kubernetes up to date. And it's been like 10 years, a decade of maintaining this entire huge, humongous project. So yeah, thank you so much. And shout out to Meha for lending a few of her slides and also like passing the baton to present instead of her. So yeah. I am happy to take any of your questions.
The tool Krell that you mentioned, and maybe some of the other tools also, are those like very tuned just for Kubernetes release, or other projects can also reuse those?
A lot of open source projects are like adopting to how Kubernetes has tried to maintain and automate the process of releasing the softwares. So it's kind of, you can say, people are getting inspired with all of the tools and creating their own versions of it. So they might use Krell, but they are also like, it is specific for Kubernetes.
Yeah, no, because we also have something for our project, but it's more driven through GitHub actions and scripts and all. So we would be interested in something is Krell available as a Golang API that we can import in our project? And
I think this is available as a script, so okay. You can also like adopt to it to your specific needs and change it according to your specific infra.
So when you say adopt use it, does it mean I need to fork the repo, or I need to copy the code over, or is it Kubernetes API I can just import in my Golang code or use it? So it's like the means on how do I take it?
I'm not aware if it's available as an API.
So the tool is maintained in Kubernetes/release repo. Currently, it's tied to Kubernetes. I think the project is working hard and hard to untie it from the KK repo itself. It might work with fork of Kubernetes, for example. People in front of you have worked with Krell to make it less tied to Kubernetes itself. But yeah, currently it's tied to it is available in Kubernetes/release, and I think the other tools Subhasmita mentioned, like promo tools, they are also in Kubernetes/K promo, I think. So the tool, you might find a lot of those repositories inside Kubernetes organization itself. You can find us later on. I think Nabarun also have worked in the release engineering side a bit, or actually a lot. He can point you to some specific tools as well. Yeah.
Just well, it's good for the community if everyone using the same set of tools, right? It becomes easier to. That's the open source way of doing things. So
it started with like Kubernetes, and then the tool actually grew bigger and bigger. And like with time now, we have realized it's such a big thing that can be used by other people. That's also part of the LTS effort as well. How to make the Kubernetes release tooling agnostic of the Kubernetes KK repo itself, and how other people who are actually trying to replicate the same thing in downstream, how can we bring it back? Yeah, everybody is doing, whoever is consuming Kubernetes is doing the same thing downstream, yeah. Again, I think there are people here who are also involved in LTS effort or in those discussions can help.
Just want to add to this. This is basically a shell script. I did try out when we were. So we have written our own scripts to automate the release. Before writing that, I did research about Krell as well. It's, I think, a shell script, and then if you copy it directly into your local system and then edit few things, add your credentials and all, it just runs very nicely without any anything else.
There's some Golang code also I saw.
So actually, what it does is, it is like some opening script. You just run the script locally. But what happens, the actual build process that used to happen in cloud before. We were very much tied to Google Cloud before. Recently, I think an year and a half back, we moved to community
This year.
infrastructure.
Yeah, this year beginning.
Yeah, that's OpenSUSE build service. So now the build process of Kubernetes actually happens on OBS projects. Yeah, but we do kick off the. I think Subhasmita mentioned our releases, Kubernetes releases run in 4 phases. You start with mocking stage and release, and then the actual releasing. From after promotion, actual releasing, we just kick off those pipelines locally, and then the actual build process happens elsewhere, not on the local machine. Yeah, because it takes a lot of power.
Yeah, in a slide you mentioned about the release team and its sub teams, right? So my question is, who can apply to be part of the team, and what is the criteria for it? And another question is, who selects them if there are lots of folks applied for the same? And in an overview, how many members currently are there in a release team, just to understand?
To answer your question, like how to apply, being in a release team is not the only way to get involved in a release. There are multiple ways. But for the shadows, if you're asking, there are multiple shadow applications that open before any release. You get notified in the Kubernetes Slack channel. If you join, you can join that. And there you get notified about it. Also, there are like social media posts about it that happen. So you fill out the form, and you don't need to be very proficient in Golang, or like you need to know each and everything in Kubernetes. If you're just interested, and if you have the enthusiasm like to contribute to the Kubernetes, and if you want to be a part of the release and learn more about it, just join the weekly calls that happen, and start like getting more familiar with the release process, how it's all of the planning goes into it, what are the people involved in it, and then you can apply through that form. And once your application, you choose your desired team in which you want to work. You can check out the sub-teams and what work they put into. And the release leads, like each sub-team has a lead, and they're responsible for selecting the shadows. So they will decide on whom to take in and whom not to. So there are lots of people applying to it, and it goes into it. Final selection is obviously done by, I think, release lead. So Priyanka has been a release lead, and that's how the process. It's very simple. Just you need to be interested, and you can apply to it to learn more about it.
Thank you.
Just to answer your last part, there are about 40 people every release cycle. So we have reduced the number of roles recently, merged a few teams, but about 40 people every release cycle. Yeah.
So my question is just a follow-up to that one. So the release team process is mostly a generic one. So my question is, when you consider specific cloud providers, right, like something might be breaking in AWS or GCP or some other cloud provider, right, and we might need a specific person within expertise within those clouds. So how do you accommodate those people, right? Because mostly people working in community won't have access to different cloud providers, right? You might need specific persons who are regularly working on those things and who have certain expertise on that. Is there a way to keep them in loop throughout the release process? Because the team gets changed or every 4-month cycle, right? And if they are willing to be involved within the Kubernetes release process to contribute to the community within the Kubernetes, as well as ensure that the support remains for the specific cloud providers, right? How can we take care of that, or how is the current process for that?
I think the release process is made generic to be easily adopted by the different cloud providers. And Kubernetes, like, it's a huge project. It can't cater to all of the flavors of Kubernetes that's built on top of it, all of the providers. So there are people involved who come from the background of that particular infrastructure. And if you go over to the Slack, there's the community who can answer most of our questions like related to these. And there are like experts who have worked throughout the projects, who are maintaining, like for example, this cloud API, cluster API provider, GCP, Azure, AWS. So there are maintainers who work in them, and also like people get involved in the release. And there's no barrier that if you are from a particular, want to support a particular infrastructure and getting into it, but it's just a simple fact that you are building something generic that can get easily adopted by any provider you want. And if it's specific to that provider, then that goes into a more deeper level of conversation that can happen in the community level and not on the like release level. I hope that answers.
I can just add one thing. The release team actually is not the set of people who develop code. The 40 people team is what shepherds the entire process, from collecting what needs to go into a release to tracking everything is on track for the 4-month cycle, and then making sure everything that is tracked lands, or whatever is not ready does not land. So to answer your question, every cycle, since the people keeps changing, or most of the people keep changing, that does not impact, because maintainers are the people outside, or maybe they can be part of release team, but when we talk about who is maintaining, we are talking about the maintainers from specific SIGs or working groups or other projects. So that expertise stays with the maintainer. Release team is not super technical work. That is also one of the reasons why release team can accept people who does not have Kubernetes expertise beforehand. But again, a good way to get started and move across the project. Yeah. Having understanding of Kubernetes definitely is a big plus if somebody wants to get started. If not, thank you, Subhasmita, for a great session, and thank you everyone for listening. Big shout out to a lot of people here who have been part of the release team. Sriram is part of the release team this particular cycle, and Orko have been part of the release team before. Subhasmita, thank you everyone. It takes a lot of effort. Yes, release engineering is another pile of work. Release team is also a humongous amount of work for that 4th cycle. I
We
think
also like encourage everyone to get involved. New, beginner, veteran, anyone who wants to like help out, give us a hand. There are lots of projects, not just release. There are lots of projects that need help. So we encourage everyone to just contribute and be a part of the Kubernetes big community.
Yeah. And I think we'll break for lunch now. People, oh, sorry, one more session. So I think next one. Science is this. Okay, let me figure out what is the next session. Give me a minute.
Thank you.